they answer it in such a way that ends up making the audience have more questions than answers.
The trend took over the writing rather than the writing taking over the writing.
And I feel like in the beginning, I was very, very anti enemies to lovers because I hate the idea that like someone can be.
Hi, I'm Max.
I'm Drew.
And I'm Leisha.
Plot hole.
Said I'd write one chapter, wrote none.
I'm sorry, you do what?
I changed the ending again.
3 writers.
Countless blueprints.
Infinite stories. And now, into the story.
So to better understand like what we're talking about when we're talking about a trope is just essentially a reoccurring theme. So it's a plot device or a character type that we see a pattern of. The romance genre in and of itself revolves around tropes a lot of the time, so we'll get to talk a little bit about that. When we're talking about trends, we're really just talking about current shifts in storytelling style, structure, character representation, or themes that are popular right now. So Drew had a really awesome example of romantasy being really, really up and coming. I know that the Regency era style has really come, back into the limelight since things like Bridgerton started coming out, and just kind of giving that a resurgence. So we'll get to talk a little bit about each of those things.
Okay, so last night I was talking to my wife, and I was just preparing for today's episode, and I was just asking her like, "Hey, what are some tropes that you like?" And my wife actually said that her favorite trope is enemies to lovers, and I know that you guys have some hot takes about this.
Okay, so mind you, like I've been reading probably contemporary romance the most for probably as long as Max and I have been together. Like where that's been like almost exclusively what I've read, aside from nonfiction, for like probably the last 5 years. And I feel like in the beginning, I was very, very anti enemies to lovers because I hate the idea that like someone can be so mean to you and then you just decide, oh, you know what? I kind of like this person. I hate that, like, it feels so toxic in my brain. But then I've also seen, like, ways in which it's done and executed really well, where you realize, like, I don't know. I guess, like, I attribute it to a lot of, I think, growing up where we were always told, like, if a boy's mean to you, they like you. And I'm very anti that. So I think that for a long time, that's really what I boiled it down to. But because I've seen some really great examples of enemies to lovers, since I started like really, really focusing on romance as a genre, it just depends on how well it's done.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a common theme when we talk about these tropes and trends, is that these are things that are popular or, they come about for a reason. And as we're talking about them, I think we'll have examples on both sides of ways that they work well and ways that they don't work, or the pitfalls that you can really have. We had mentioned a trend in that came out in the 2010s with like specifically dystopian stories led by a strong female lead who often used a bow for some reason. I saw this picture once of like all the archers in fantasy and like fiction and stuff, and it was really funny. It was mostly just Katniss and Legolas, but that was a big trend and everything. And Hunger Games did it like kind of first and kind of the best, and then you had stuff like Divergent come out, where I actually read the first Divergent book and I kind of liked it, but as I started thinking more about it and as I tried to read the second book, it started to fall more flat and realize how much of they fell into what I think is the trend. The trend took over the writing rather than the writing taking over the writing.
So I think that leads into one of my first questions for you guys, talking a little bit more about trends. Are there any current trends, especially like in the fantasy genre, that you feel like pressure to follow? And then if that's the case, do you feel like you're leaning into them, or do you feel like you're resisting any inclination to lean into that specific trend right now.
So we obviously all know that romantasy is a huge trend right now. It's everywhere. Like every agent on their on their profile is saying that they're looking for romantasy authors. It's just blowing up. And I don't feel necessarily pressured to write a romantasy book, but I do feel pressured to, at the very least, have a romantic subplot in my fantasy story. And I feel like I'm kind of resisting it a little bit just because, one, I don't really have a ton of experience writing romance. I mean, I have experience with real life romance. I'm married after all, but I I don't necessarily know if that's like the same thing set in a fantasy setting. And I also I just don't feel like super confident writing romance, but the romantic subplot is something that matters to a lot of readers. And so I'm kind of going back and forth battling like do I give my main character a love interest or do I not? Like I just have been juggling that for so long now.
I do feel like love interest is like almost necessary in all fiction just because that's very relatable to so many people. But I agree with you that I don't feel while I feel pressure to write romantic subplots, I don't think love interests necessarily have to be romantic. My favorite example of this is have either of you ever read Ender's Game?
Yes.
No.
So in Ender's Game, in the book, not the movie. In the movie, they take a random one of the other female characters and make it his romantic interest. In the book, he has no romantic interest. It's all focused on like the story aspect of it. His love is his sister. He loves his sister, and he wants to wants to be there for Valentine whenever he can and everything. And he takes time to go and visit her and everything. And that I think works really well in that story. He's having like a sibling love, like being able to kind of write that in. And I feel like that's where I want to go with my story currently. Is I want to go with more of a platonic love rather than a like romantic love as much.
I mean, I find a way to plug this in every single episode we've had so far, but I'm going to bring up Lord of the Rings once again.
A great one.
It's such a good example of platonic relationships. There's no love interest for Frodo. Like, I mean, obviously, like, I can't remember her name. What's Sam's love interest from back home?
Oh my goodness. It's Rosie Cotton. Rosie Cotton down in South Lane.
Oh my gosh. We're cutting all of that out.
I'm definitely not cutting that.
Yeah. So to talk a little bit about Lord of the Rings again, obviously Frodo doesn't have a love interest, but there's like some subplots of romantic love where we have Sam and Rosie. We have obviously Aragorn and Arwen. So these are very real things that are kind of happening behind the scenes. But when you look at the main character, like the love that we see for him is the love of every single person that's backing him on his journey. I love that it exemplifies like such a good component of masculine love. Once again, the most romantic thing that's ever been said, but it was said between two friends, is what Aragorn said to Frodo, okay? I think that that's so underrated as an important component of stories as someone who loves romance. So it's one of those things where I do think that there are ways that you can make love a component of your story without having to necessarily be romantic love.
The quote she's referencing, by the way, says something like, "I would have gone with you to the end, to the very fires of Mordor." And I agree. It's like you can write strong love into a story without necessarily having to make it romantic or anything like that. So I do feel like that's part of the trend or the trope of romance that you can really play with a lot, which I think is good. And you can have both too. Like if you, Drew, if you or I end up having romantic subplots and also platonic subplots, like that's good. I think that's great.
I actually really love the example that was brought up about like sibling love, like how much they love and like support
Care
each
about each
other
other,
and
yeah.
care about each other. A really uh good example that I like from a YA author is Brandon Mull in Fablehaven with
That's a good point.
Seth and oh my gosh, what's the sister's name? Kendra.
Yeah,
They-
absolutely.
I really like their dynamic because they act like siblings, right? But then like when it comes down to it, like their teamwork is so good all the time. Even though Kendra's like ticked at Seth for doing something stupid or reckless or whatever, like they always have each other's back, and I actually really like the platonic like sibling love and care and support as just like that like softer side to a story.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to kind of now change directions a little bit. Says because you said that you've come around to enemies to lovers. What are some tropes that you guys still very dislike? And I have an example.
You can start off. Then, yeah.
I really dislike basically anything time travel related.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I agree.
I can't stand it because nobody can agree on what actually like works. And I feel like when authors or story writers are questioned about the mechanics of their time travel, they answer it in such a way that ends up making the audience have more questions than answers at the end of it all. A great example of this is the time turners in Harry Potter. Like she just J.K. Rowling just brings up this this magic system in her story that suddenly the wizards can time travel, but it's used for school so that way she can like Hermione can get to more classes. I feel like we could just use the time turners to just resolve this entire plot right now, but we don't.
Well,
and I
the
can't
best
stand it.
part about that is that, like in the 5th book, the way she gets around any kind of issue with the time turners is that all the time turners break.
Yeah, which is
in the-
ridiculous.
Well, and then like you get into like the Cursed Child, which I don't know if you know much about, but the Cursed Child is like her like screenplay that she wrote for in the Harry Potter universe, and it literally entirely revolves around time travel. So
Yeah, I don't like time travel because there's multiple reasons I don't like travel. I don't like time travel. One, no one seems to be able to keep it consistent in their head or it on paper. Like it just the more that you explore it, the more muddied it gets. Also, I don't like how people use time travel to undo like failures and character growth moments. A great example of this actually is the MCU. I cannot stand that they time traveled after the Thanos snap to go make him undo the Thanos snap. And to be fair, since that point, the MCU has been on a downwards trajectory in terms of quality. So I don't know. Correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but if you ask me, but seriously, like I actually really think that a story is just so much more interesting when the characters and the setting are forced to deal with the consequences of actions rather than them trying to undo this thing that's already been done.
Yeah, Max, do you have an example? I have one.
Well, I just wanted to come to Endgame's defense on time travel a little bit. I like the fact that they didn't undo time by, they even talk about like I think Rhodey brings up, why don't we just go up to baby Thanos and he like makes a motion to like choke him.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's terrible. Like, why would you suggest that? And what they do is they find a way to, recreate the events themselves, and then there's a lot of character growth in those moments as they're going through time. Like I like Tony being able to meet like his dad, like kind of thing. Like I think that's kind of like a cool aspects of it that you can play with. But I'm in general agreement with you. Time travel is just kind of a cop out a lot of the time, I think, and it's hard to do it right. And I think you should really only have it if your story is about time travel. Period. Like if
Correct.
it's like
Yes.
if it starts off that way, cool. I don't think it should be used as a plot device to kind of pull you out of a, I wrote myself into a corner.
Yeah, I just, just to keep harping on the MCU here, I just don't like that we have a story about superheroes, and then we like out of nowhere, seemingly, time travel is introduced into the plot. And I don't know. It feels weird.
Hey, writer friends! Quick pause from the storytelling spiral to say, if you're loving the Word Builders, come be a part of the chaos behind the mic. We're hanging out on Instagram and YouTube at The Word Builders, sharing behind-the-scenes bits, writing prompts, and very questionable memes about the writing process. Want to yell at us about your favorite trope? Send us your word-building wins, hit follow, drop a comment, and let us know what you're building. We're probably cheering you on in the replies. All right, back to the episode.
So I'm actually going to bring up something that I feel like is this is very specifically, I think, geared toward me and kind of bringing back like why I don't think I've loved enemies to lovers as a trope. I personally really don't like dark romance. So just to kind of talk a little bit about that, like, so for me, power imbalances aren't sexy. Like, there's nothing appealing about like one part of a partnership having all of the control, whether that's like emotional, financial, or physical. It just really shifts like the dynamic from romantic to coercive. I also don't think that like certain behavior should be romanticized. So I don't love that that dark romance really gears toward romanticizing things like manipulation or obsession. I think that there's a there's healthy components of that when you're with somebody. I don't know. It's just one of those things where I just feel like it can get really destructive really quickly. And yeah, it's just been one of those things. And so I think more specifically when I'm talking about the examples of enemies to lovers that I haven't liked, it's because it was geared toward dark romance. And I just really don't like the components that are within that. I think that there's healthier ways to be able to display like, even when when your feelings are complex or complicated, in a romantic setting. I just don't think it needs to, I don't think it needs to lean into really bad characteristics. I don't want to fall in love with a red flag.
Yeah, it's essentially like romanticizing like abuse in a lot of ways, right?
Right. And power to whoever like that's their thing, or that's something that because at the end of the day it's fantasy, and that's what all it really boils down to, especially like for people who are interested in the romantic genre. I just think that for me that's not something I find appealing.
Okay. Max, did you say you had one?
Universes. I
Okay.
think, and this is also tying back to the MCU, ever since then, and also I'll give some blame to Brandon Sanderson as well with his Cosmere. Everyone wants to make a cinematic or book multi-universe where all the books tie together and everything, and I will say I tried to do that too. Like I tried. I really did. I really wanted it to work, and I had mapped it all out, and I had all these different stories, but like I don't think it's necessary for everybody. I think standalone books, standalone works are great. And I don't want to like fault anybody who wants to do that. I think it's if you do it right, it's awesome. But I also just don't think it has to happen every time.
I think you might have a point. However, to argue that I think universes are important, I think that when the amount of dedication that goes into creating those universes, like here's the thing. I think where Marvel got it wrong is that now the universe is so large that it's never going to end. Like there's no I don't know. I think when I think about a universe, obviously, like I want the universe to continue. Like I want there to be an idea of like, okay, like these like things are going to continue to happen. Like there's going to be great things and bad things and everything in between. But I feel like where the MCU got it wrong is that it has to be explained every single time. Like like there can be no room for interpretation. Like the MCU is just going to go through each and every single pivotal character and is going to give them a spotlight. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the my favorite phrase I've heard about this is like the MCU TV shows were all like nerd homework.
Yeah.
So is if you hadn't watched the TV show, then you didn't understand the movie. I know they've announced that they're gonna do away with that. They're gonna do TV shows will be standalone. They won't be as connected. But
But that's still like harps on my point. Like it's you're explaining. You're still explaining. It's like there
show don't tell. Like
so I think that that's probably my biggest gripe with universes specifically.
sure. I wanted to bring this up because I know, Drew, you've talked about wanting your books to be in a universe of sorts, correct?
Yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna talk about that a little bit more, but
Go for it.
well, so I think the in general the reason that I probably like most of the time end up having an issue with universes is that not that the stories get less and less interesting, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I most of the time will kind of just like get burnt out on that universe.
Yeah.
And so I think a big difference here between I don't want to keep using the MCU. Have you guys ever read the Warriors books
Yes.
about
I
the
didn't,
about the
but
cats?
I was just talking to Max about this the other day.
I was an owl kid, okay? I did Guardians of Ga'Hoole.
which is also good.
So I was a huge Warrior readers when I was in like elementary school.
Same.
This is such a good
Oh
tangent on
my
this.
gosh! But in a way, that series has become like a universe now. There's
Right.
like a couple hundred books, I think, based on this universe of like cats with like magical celestial powers, and they're all separated into like different factions and things. Like the universe, the Warrior Cats universe got too big for me to have the time or desire to keep up with. Which is why I think if you are going to do this universe style of writing, it's okay that you have some standalone books that can just be standalone in that universe. They don't have to tie in to every other series that you're writing that exists within that universe. And so
Right.
I am trying to do the universe thing that Max hates so much. I'm kidding, but
I don't hate it.
It's- no,
I'll
it's
explain in a
fine.
minute.
It's fine. And I when I'm sitting here, outlining my books for the different sections of this universe, I'm actually like intentionally trying to be like, okay, these need to be their own separate stories that exist within the universe. And will there be some crossover? Yeah, of course. I think that's cool. I think enjoyers of stories really find it interesting when, oh my gosh, wait, that character is connected to this story? That's really cool. I think that's really cool. The problem is, like you said, when it gets to the point where everything is so interconnected that everybody always has to be involved and everybody always has to be feeling the effects of the actions in a different movie or in a different book or something like that. That's where I feel like it starts to get muddied and less enjoyable, because like you said, you have to be doing homework. You have to be keeping up with things. You can't just pick up a different series, start reading it, and then be like, wait, I feel like the author is talking about something that I don't have the prerequisite knowledge about.
Yeah, I think I should say universes can be done correctly in that sense. And I love the Brandon Sanderson version of universe where it's a Cosmere where the books are all their own thing, but they have similar elements to them that help them kind of feel similar, feel tied together. Big tropes about like big focuses on like aspects like honor or courage, that kind of thing. And the the occasional recurring character is kind of fun too. I just don't like it for my own writing right now because I tried so long and so hard to make a big universe that I'm trying to focus more on the ground level at this point.
I I kind of want to shift into a little bit of a tangent, and it's kind of related to our universe discussion. I think a trend that I think we've moved away from in some aspects, but have also really dug into is fan fiction.
Mm.
Um, because like even if I just think about like romance fan fiction that I've seen a lot of recently, it's Hermione. So like shipping Draco and Hermione from the Harry Potter series.
Oh.
And this has been
What?
huge because there's some like really really famous like Hermione fan fiction that like has actually been compiled into books. And so I think something I wanted to extend to you guys is like, do you guys feel like fan fiction is an extension of a universe? Because obviously, many people who write fanfic either create their own stories with it by creating their own original characters, or they, try to come up with different ways to either continue the story or to like kind of pose a what if. Do you guys feel like fan fiction is an extension of a universe, or is it just, fanfare?
I think of fan fiction like I think of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons is collaborative storytelling, and it for the most part it's set in one universe where they have all these planes of existence and different races and elves and dwarves and all these things. But like each time you play a game, you introducing your own fresh character and your own take on things. And even if you do a homebrew campaign, like you're using a lot of the same elements. And I feel like that's kind of where fan fiction lies for me. Is that it's part of a universe, but like if you write it and no one knows about it, you're happy with that too. Like if you play the D&D campaign, no one ever watches your D&D stream or whatever. um, it's okay too because you had fun with it. No, so I feel like fan fiction kind of lies in that zone for me.
Fan fiction to me feels more like an alternate universe. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not the main timeline. It's these characters are slightly different in this way, and it's totally plausible that this story exists in an alternate plane of existence or something, alternate plane of reality. And that's kind of how I view fan fiction. But I also definitely think that fan fiction is actually really great if you're just getting into writing, because the burden of creating the universe and creating the characters is not on you as the writer. You get to use an existing set of tools basically to create something unique, which I think
Yeah.
is really good for people who are like just getting into writing. I'm not saying that you should, you know,
Base your career on
break copyright law and write stories and make that your career. But I mean, for practice, being able to like remove the burden of having to create characters and a setting and world build and all of these other things, I actually think it's pretty great.
Yeah. I mean, I got a lot of my early writing. A lot of my early writing was fanfic. Like when I think back on, what I did when I was younger as a writer, beyond journaling, like, because there was definitely a shift where like the early stories that you write as a kid are usually like narrative ones that your teacher asked you to write, like write about a time that you were scared or whatever. So like you're kind of given a prompt and then you kind of go from there. And I feel like fanfic is really you coming up with that prompt and then building everything upon a world that's already set, which I think is a really great way to just be able to learn about like what are some of the things that go into a character and what are like really compelling pieces of stories. And so I totally agree with you. I think it's a really, really great place to start writing. And I think that the hope is that eventually we're able to create our own stories. But I also understand like people get really comfortable within the realm of fan fiction. And, that tends to be like where, they do really, really well. So, um, yeah.
I have to ask, um, Drew, did you write fan fiction as a kid?
I have never written any fan fiction.
Okay, so then I'll just ask this question for me and Leisha. What did you write fanfiction about?
I really don't like that you asked this question. I kind of
You don't have to answer it. I'll answer it.
I can answer the question, but you go first.
Okay, I had a fanfiction about Bionicle Universe, like the Lego sets and everything. And my big one was I had Star Wars fanfiction. I was writing a weekly, like, segmented, like, chapters that I would send to my family, about Han Solo becoming a Jedi and about a new Sith Lord named Darth Paul.
That is so
That's
good.
right.
That is so
It was
good.
so good. It was so good.
Please,
Okay,
please
it was
tell me you have these
awesome.
emails to your that you sent to your family.
He most definitely probably does.
I probably do. I save everything, but I
Okay, when we
uh,
start
I put it
our
on the
like
wall.
newsletters
Oh
or our blog,
no!
we gotta start including this stuff. We
Oh no!
have to.
Oh my gosh.
I did
That's
this myself.
hysterical.
I did.
That's actually so
I
good.
was hoping for Leisha to be vulnerable, but instead I put myself out there too much.
Chopping block. So this kind of requires a little bit of background. So like when I was younger, so my parents got divorced when I was pretty young, but what was really like what was really great about that experience that I feel like I can look back on and really enjoy about it is that I got like really great one-on-one time with each of my parents because it's what we had.
Way to
And
keep a
so our
positive
one-on-one
mindset.
right. So one of the really great aspects of it was that when I got to spend time with my dad and my brothers, like all of us all together, like we got into stuff as a family. And it's still stuff that we talk about to this day. So like just as a random example, we got really into America's Got Talent for a while, and we would literally watch it every year for years at a time. But one of the things we really got into was video games. And so we all got obsessed with this one specific video game series as Gears of War. And it's still something that like my brother and that's right below me and I, who Drew actually met this last week, we are still really obsessed with this game series. But I would write fan fiction about Gears of War. And so
You
love the
what?
story.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know this actually.
You knew this recently.
Here's the thing: she played Gears of War literally like the other day. So
I got really into the story and I was like, wow, like this is a really, really great universe. And so a lot of my early writing was actually Gears of War fan fiction. And actually, my dad's dad, my grandpa, I had let him read some of my fan fiction and he loved it. He was obsessed. And he was honestly one of my main champions that I still think about to this day that really helped me continue to write. So and here's the thing, part of the problem was is that at the time I didn't have a computer, so all of the writing that I did early in those days was all handwritten.
oof.
I could have stopped myself at any time, but I didn't.
I just think that fan fiction gets a really bad rap because I brought up the idea of a fan fiction because we had talked about it, and then I was telling
Right.
my wife that we had talked about it, and she was like, "Don't people like isn't fan fiction just like a way for people to like write their characters in a specifically like fantasized way?" And I was like,
Ah,
It can be.
I mean, yes. I think the implication was that it was like in an inappropriate way, and
ah,
and I was like, I mean, there's definitely like a lot of people that write fan fiction that falls into that category, yeah. But I would say the majority of it is definitely people just like wanting to see their the characters that they love so much trying something different or doing something different. I wanted to kind of change the topic just a little bit. Going so we know about romantasy and universes as really popular trends right now. I'm gonna ask you guys to pull out your crystal ball and
Okay.
and we're gonna attempt to divine the future a little bit here. What trend do you think is going to blow up in like the next decade with writing?
actually, and this might be semi-related. Something that Max and I were talking about the other day is that we have a lot of like really, I I would say probably the last 25 years. We've had a lot of events in the last 25 years that have been globalized in a way that events prior to that point had not, been as accessible as they are now. So one of the things that I think will probably actually blow up is involving more of the events that we see on a regular basis in writing. So I'm very intrigued on how that's going to pan out, because I think that like the amphitheater for events now in the world, even on a smaller scale, are way more visible than they ever were before. The way that kids have to be so conscientious of their digital footprint is unlike anything that I've ever seen before. And like, we're part of the generation that was taught about like these things, but even now I feel like it's gone way beyond what we thought it would. So I'm really intrigued as to how that's going to continue to impact writing as a whole. I'm curious as to whether that's going to expand the amount of writing that's out there. Like, obviously one of the big topics I think of conversation and trends within like book talk specifically is talking about banned books. So like, classic literature that for all intents and purposes like talk about subjects that kind of go against the status quo. And I'm interested to see how there are going to be authors that are going to continue to grow that list, but I think it's necessary.
I'm just gonna say fantasy mystery, not because I'm writing one.
That's really funny because I actually was talking. My wife and I talked about this topic a lot last night. If you can't tell, I keep bringing her up. I did bring up I did bring up specifically like fantasy mystery, but I guess more. I think the trend personally that I think is going to really blow up in the next decade or so is going to be the like mashing of two genres.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we're already seeing that with romantasy.
Yeah. I just think that it's
So-
going to expand into other things such as fantasy, mystery, and those kinds of things. Sci-fi horror has kind of been one for a while now, but it's not quite as mainstream. But just more like I'm gonna take this idea and like smash them together. Like I think genuinely, a Regency era romance that was set in a fantasy setting would be so cool, because
Absolutely.
like just to kind of take those those courting principles and things like that from that era, but then move it into a fantasy world would be really cool. Because the modern day fantasy romantasy, let's be honest, it's mostly like smut material. But from a Regency era romance style, I think
You opened a can of worms with that sentence.
Do not yuck or yum. Me and your wife are on the same page on this, okay?
I'm not
Yeah,
yucking it. I'm just saying that's what it is.
That's a good soundbite.
Oh man. Oh, this is an interesting episode. Let's be honest.
I think, and I totally think you're right. I feel like the genre meshing that we've seen recently has always been like kind of tangentially related. So like a lot of the books that I've like grown up loving are mystery thriller. So, they have really common elements, so they go together really, really well. But I feel like when you start to see like things that are a little bit out of the norm, so like one that I'm really interested to see that I saw come up was like horror comedy, which I mean we have like examples of like the scary movie series, which is more comedy than horror by a long shot.
Or like Shaun of the Dead.
Right. So like things like that where you start to see like this really kind of interesting meshes of genres. I think that that's going to become something that's popular in written media as opposed to just movies.
Yeah, I think you've discovered that one, Drew. I think that's probably gonna be it.
Yeah.
One more trope I wanted to bring up before we move on is I wanted to ask you guys about how you guys feel about the Chosen One trope. I feel like this it's more fantasy and sci-fi than it is like romance, but I don't know. It's so prevalent in a lot of stories. How do you guys feel about the Chosen One as a trope?
I have I have mixed feelings about the Chosen One because almost always it involves some kind of like ancient prophecy that some specific special individual is going to come along and they're going to save the world. And I don't that's not necessarily the part that I have a problem with. The part that most of the time bothers me is that the Chosen One ends up being like the story starts from their point of view when they're like 12
Yeah.
and I don't really care how many special superpowers you have by the virtue of being the chosen one. I just have never met a 12-year-old who's able to like solve problems in the way that some of these 12-year-olds in these stories are able to solve problems.
It's so true.
And
But
so
there are definitely adults that are adults well beyond 12 years old
That also can't
that also can't solve problems.
and that's
True.
that's totally fine. I understand that. I don't hate it. I guess I think it's funny to me that I'm just like, oh, okay, here's this 12-year-old who, had a meltdown this morning because they just couldn't find the right shirt to wear. And then they're also bearing the burden of trying to also save the planet. I I don't know. I like them from it's just like really cool because I feel like a lot of chosen one style stories are also self-insert stories where you could like you as the reader like you could see yourself like in their shoes or rather you want to see yourself in their shoes. I think that's really interesting. I just I just always think it's funny that how it's like always like some 12-year-old kid.
Yeah, so something to be noted is if you've been potty trained in like the last 10 years, you probably shouldn't be tasked with saving the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's tough because I'm in agreement with you, Drew, and that chosen one stories I think they're kind of linear in ways too. Like we kind of know what's gonna happen. Oh wait, just raising your hand. What's up?
Hold on. Okay, so I agree with you guys to a point. Like, I think that there are definitely things that are done with the Chosen One story that kind of follow like a very similar tune. I mean, the example that kind of came to mind, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but this is actually one of my favorite stories of all time, is Dark Crystal.
Oh yes.
Drew, have you ever seen Dark Crystal?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's the best.
We're gonna make you and your wife watch the series, the Netflix series, and then watch the movie.
Oh man, it's gonna be so good.
Like my brother-in-law, Max's brother, literally came over the other night and he was like, "Hey, so now that you guys are back in town, can you guys like can we finish the show, please?" He's like, "I want to finish the show." I've converted many people over to this show, okay?
Okay.
So the Dark Crystal is essentially it's a fantasy movie. It's puppets. The movie actually came out back in the 80s. Kind of around the same time as like Labyrinth with David Bowie came out. So just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on in the movie, the main character's name is Jen. So Jen is raised by a noble race called the Mystics and has been told he's the last survivor of his own race, which are called the Gelflings. He sets out to try to find a shard of the Dark Crystal, which is a powerful gem that once provided balance to the universe. So after the crystal was broken, the evil Skeksis, which are a alien race to this world, Mr. means to gain control. So Jen believes that he can repair the Dark Crystal and bring peace back to the world if he can find the missing shard. So that is essentially the plot of the movie. So obviously the show came out in like 2019. It was right around when I finished high school. The show came out many years later because are you familiar with Jim Henson? Like he's the one that does all of the Muppets.
He invented Sesame
Street. He was like really pivotal in creating those puppets as well.
I've never heard his name, but if that's his works, then yeah, I guess I would say I'm familiar with him.
You're pretty familiar with Jim Henson's work. So Dark Crystal was a very early work of his, and he wasn't happy with how everything turned out. Like technology was just not where he wanted it to be able to portray the fantasy elements of the story. So over like 30 years later, his daughter, Lisa Henson, went to Netflix and said, "Hey, I really want to retell this story, but I want to I want to tell the story of what happened before the Dark Crystal." And so there's a show on Netflix where it's a prequel to the movie where it's you're following the story of the Gelfling. And so I think what's really cool about the way that that's done is that you know that there's a chosen one. You're watching everything play out beforehand before they understand that there really is a prophecy at play.
Mhm.
I think that that one was done extremely well because I think that there's something to there's something to glean when you're not even necessarily sure if there really is a chosen one. I think that when we allow like our characters to just I don't know, find out what their fate is throughout the story, I think that that makes a much more compelling story as opposed to where you know this is a chosen one from the beginning and they're trying to figure out how to get to the point where they're supposed to save the world. Like I think about Avatar as a great example of like Aang knows he's the Avatar. Like he knows that he is tasked with like a huge responsibility, but he still has so much to learn. I think that that is done really, really well, and that's a great example of a chosen one like story arc. But I also like when you're just learning things kind of throughout the exposition of the story. So that was a long-winded way of saying I think the Dark Crystal does it really well.
My addition to this Chosen One discussion is I agree. I think the Chosen One can be done wrong. And I think it can be a little bit of a pitfall too if you want to kind of, handhold your readers to a certain ending. But I think one of my favorite books that I've started reading in the past year is called The Art of Prophecy by Wesley Chu. And basically in the book, they kind of introduced the idea that the evil empire that they're fighting is there's a prophecy about this chosen one that will come along to defeat them, and when the chosen one is born, they actually pamper the chosen one. They know who it is, and he's born. He's given this big palace, and even though he's trained by the greatest warriors of the realm, it's against the law for him to lose battle. So during his training, everyone kind of defers to him, and he just lets them. They just let him win every time. It's kind of interesting to see the chosen one, was given the opportunity to be that person, and was it the way that they did it, they went about it, ended up squandering his potential. And so the book starts off with him having a new trainer who's like, you've been trained wrong this whole time. I'm gonna make you work for it now. And then quickly you find out too that his prophecy that he's supposed to fulfill is fulfilled without him. And so then he's like, what am I doing now with my life, with this world and everything? And the world starts plunging into chaos for other reasons. And I think it's a really cool way to take the chosen one trope and flip it on its head and say, hey, I think that maybe the chosen one, maybe the prophecy wasn't real. Or, if it isn't real, what can I do about it myself?
Just another reminder or another example of that, actually, I think, is Star Wars. I think Star Wars is a great example of the chosen one story.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
because
definitely.
Anakin is very obviously the chosen one, but then he turns evil, and so we're all like, wait, what? It just kind of it provides a really unique and interesting take on the chosen one.
Actually, I found out recently that apparently on the original scripts of Star Wars, Luke was supposed to succumb to the dark side at the end of this episode 6.
Oh,
He was
really?
supposed to be join the Emperor and kill his father, and then Leia was going to be the chosen one, basically. And but I think the way he ended up choosing to do it instead worked better because it made Anakin's story go full circle. I know we didn't get the prequels series until later, but Anakin choosing to overcome himself and the dark side to join his son is awesome. And I think it's a great way to take that chosen one, and he's not technically, I mean, he is the main character of Star Wars, but I mean, on top of, when you're first watching the series, like from Luke's point of view, he's the main character.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end of the day, I mean, it's his dad, really.
Our last question. How do tropes and trends affect your reading habits versus your writing process?
Ooh.
I think I can go first here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some additional romance tropes and kind of how they've been factoring into my writing as well as like current trends. So like there are definitely things that I love to read that I don't feel like I can write very well. So an example of that would be Grumpy versus Sunshine. I love that trope so much. I know it's like really like a lot of the time you see it in enemies to lovers plots. Like there's always just one person that just like has like the emotional range of a rock, and then you have someone that's like really happy go lucky and like for some reason they just can't stand each other. But that's not something that I feel super comfortable writing because I don't know if I can give a grumpy person justice. I guess some of the ways that I feel like current tropes and trends have affected my writing is like one thing that I've been trying to do, and this has been a pretty big trend in a lot of romance books, has been dual POV. So having both of your main characters have their perspective shared in usually alternating chapters. So I am doing something very similar. I also am utilizing mixed media. So I'm not just telling the story like by writing each chapter. I'm also including correspondence, so emails, text messages, things like that. So I'm also incorporating that, and I feel like that's been really trendy in a lot of books recently. So I definitely think that when it comes to my writing, I want it to be something that is really reflective of this time. Like I'm not scared of that potentially becoming out of date at some point in time. I think, but I want it to be true to this point in time that I'm writing it during. So I think that that's something that I'm digging into a little bit that I feel like has impacted my writing process. But I'm a little excited to see how it grows from here.
I think for my reading trends and my writing trends lately, I've been trying to focus more on like catching up on some of the quote unquote classics, the ones that I've always wanted to read and just never got around to. So I started trying to finish the Mistborn series finally, and which is funny because that's like an in-universe thing that also has a chosen one trope. So I'm kind of being ironic there, I guess. I'm trying to, and I've got like things like to actually sit down and read Lord of the Rings on my list. I want to read Dune and everything. Like I want to, so I think I'm wanting to look back and on the past more and see what trends worked then, and see if I can incorporate them now. I do feel like my writing is, and I have this problem because I like to try and be unique in everything I do, and that kind of is difficult to do in a world where every story type has been written, and it's just different name, different background most of the time. But trying to figure that out, and so trying to find my balance there with the trends that I'm liking and the tropes that I'm revisiting, and seeing if they work in my world right now. I don't know how it's going so far, but it's going.
I would say I have a hard time like starting a book. And the main reason is because I know that it's going to get to the point like a week or two into reading the book that I'm going to have like 2 or 3 nights in a row that I just don't sleep because
That is the plight of being a reader.
I just am like so invested in the story. So I actually have not been like very good with my reading recently, but with the books that I have read this year so far, they've definitely just been like mirrored pretty much almost exactly what I'm trying to write. And it's both it's just the stories that I enjoy as well as a way for me to learn from the best. Because at the end of the day, like we talk about this, we talk about these things, we talk about writing, we talk about creative writing because it's what we want to do. It's something that we want to accomplish going into the future. We all want to make bestseller lists, and depending on who you talk to, some people say that's not what you should be shooting for. You should just write for like the love of writing, and that's definitely true. But if I'm going to shoot for the stars, I might as well like read some of the things that falls into the same genre, but also read stuff that doesn't fall into that genre, so that way I can have a variety of perspectives. And so I would say what I'm reading right now, or what I've read this year, it relates pretty closely to my writing because it's what I'm looking for inspiration in.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I feel like I can relate to that. And so one of the things I've been doing has been transitioning a lot more into audiobooks. Fortunately, having Spotify Premium gives us access to audiobooks, so that's made it like even more accessible. And so I've transitioned into that a lot, and I feel like it helps me slow down a little bit on reading because I think of myself not as a bookworm but a book dragon. And like I have like my hoard.
I was so confused on where that was gonna go for a second.
I have like my hoard of books
She eats a lot of books, is what
that
you're saying.
that I'm protecting, and then before I know it, like I'm blazing through like 7 or 9 at a time for some reason. So I feel like trying to find things that slow me down a little bit more, but help me kind of dig a little bit more into just really enjoying the book as I'm reading it has been really nice. So actually I discovered one of my favorite books like ever throughout this process. And so something that I think I'm also trying to incorporate a little bit more is like good banter. Obviously Max and I tease each other all the time, but that's what I like about our relationship, and that's what I love about interactions that I see between characters in a lot of the books that I like to read. And so I think when like you find someone that does banter really really well, it just like it gets me excited to write good solid characters that can have those kinds of interactions. So yeah, like just to bring up earlier when we were talking about sibling dynamics, like that's something that I feel like not all not all writers get it right, or even in movies, like I there are definitely things out there where I look at the interaction between the two of them, I'm like, that's way too sweet for a sibling duo, like my brother, for sure at least one point in our life threw a controller at my face and made my nose bleed, like that's a real sibling dynamic that is lost.
Yeah, bring that back. Yeah.
But, it's one of those things where like like the happy birthday texts that I get from my brother are horrible. Like like from anyone else you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that's a horrible thing to say." But because it's from my brother who I've known my whole life, I don't even bat an eye.
You know that it comes
So
from a
it's just one
place of love. You know what I mean?
exactly. So and I feel like I think that those are the kind of compelling characters that I want to write, where even if you're just meeting this character for the first time on a page, like I want that familiarity to be there.
Awesome. Well, I think this has been a great discussion. Let's move on to our weekly word count. Now we've had some rough weeks. I know that. What are we all sitting at this week?
Okay, so I feel like I need to preface this week. I I was doing a lot of I didn't make a lot of story progress this week. I was doing a lot of world building development this week. So I wrote 434 words this week, which is not a lot. However, it did allow me to put a lot of things into perspective on how I would like to continue with my story and other future stories that fall within this universe. Calling back to our universe discussion from earlier in this episode. Um, and so I feel like I'm getting a lot of things down on the page that are going to be helpful to me later. So I know it wasn't a lot of words, but 434 was my number this week. Um, I've at this point I think I've got to start writing like between 1 and 2,000 words a day if I'm gonna meet our September goal. So I gotta buckle down.
Yeah, I'm probably I have to do even more than that. I think because I had a good week a couple weeks ago where I wrote like 1,200 words, but um, with us moving and everything, it's gotten down to I did about 325 words this week. I have been writing like in the story actually. I've been trying to keep moving in there, and I've got some good stuff I'm working towards, but Yeah, September word goal is a little bit daunting at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think I'm any closer. 387.
Just
I
cut
did
out
just
for a
start a
second.
new job. That's been a big focus of mine this last week.
But hey, I mean, we do this because, everyone's got their busy lives, but if you want to write a book, we want to show you guys that even in a busy life, we can write a couple hundred words a week, and well, we're happy to keep doing that. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the story.
That's a wrap on today's chapter. Whether you're building kingdoms, cozy kitchens, or characters worth rooting for, keep writing, and we'll see you next time in the story.